Hello and welcome to the third lecture. The first two lectures were kind of casual. This one's more formal, and it will be Jordan Peterson through the CTMU lens. We'll be covering each philosopher specifically in the remaining 5 lectures of this module of this first course. I will be giving the specifics on Jordan Peterson, and there will be a document that I will give alongside this lecture. But this lecture is about Jordan Peterson specifically. I will do one on Alexander Dugin, Slavoj Žižek, and Chris Lang by himself, but starting with Jordan Peterson, the thesis is Jordan Peterson through the CTMU lens. The thesis is that the two thrusts of Jordan Peterson's work are this. First, story, myth, and narrative of the especially religious variety, and two, concern with the psychology and neuropsychology of consciousness and perception. Both of these have been descriptively included in the model of the CTMU. Peterson is still highly useful and should be studied as both embodiment and key discerner of the spirit of the Western tradition. The CTMU can model his contribution in integrating it into the foundational language of reality, but Peterson's resonance clearly indicates the power of the Western spirit, including scientific and religious worldviews. When articulated fully, they have great power, and this is the power of the Western spirit, I will say. Point one, there's really two major thrusts of Peterson's work, and there's so much. If you read his Titanic work, Maps of Meaning, you will fill in so many more details than I can give here. And likely in future courses and future seasons of this academy, we will be going in depth into the study of Maps of Meaning, his magnum opus of Jordan Peterson's work, where he fills the archetypes, the collective unconscious, the story, myth, narrative, all this stuff. But just for an overview of Peterson on the CTMU lens right now. Two thrusts to his work. Peterson first is the story, myth, narrative, especially religious narrative, story, myth, narrative, and then two, psychology and neuropsychology of consciousness and perception. These are the two thrusts of Peterson's work. I'll give an example. So with story, myth, narrative, he's always talking about whether it be the tragedy in Russia with the gulags through Alexander Solzhenitsyn's work, or he's talking about Dostoevsky, or he's talking about Jesus Christ, or he's talking about heroes in Greek mythology. He's always bringing story, myth, and narrative, and he's really in this, as I've said, a fusion between Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. But what he does is he creates all these diagrams and maps of meaning. One shows the hero's journey. The hero's journey is undesirable present. Heroes, then right here starts at undesirable present. Then it moves up on a diagonal like this, moving upwards through the hero's journey. The hero's journey is in the center here, and then at the end is the desired future. This is the quintessential breakdown of the hero's journey: undesirable present, hero's journey, desired future. And often in the archetypal imagery, the hero is a prince or a prince figure that goes outside the walls of the kingdom, slays a dragon, rescues a maiden, comes back and becomes king, is then king. But the hero, as Carl Jung said, the hero archetype is so much more than the father archetype or even the wise king archetype, because the hero, as Peterson has said, the most memorable line from Maps Meeting was, "Just as the hero is more than the sum of his concrete productions, he is the merger of opposites within a single breast, and he serves as active conscious mediator between the eternal general forces of known and unknown. He is like the alchemical stone or the golden goose in that he transforms potential into actuality, chaos into order." And if you follow Peterson, he divides reality into these two layers, chaos and order. The hero kind of surfs between these and then partakes of turning chaos into order. This is a story. This is the hero story. And he gets into the chaotic nature, tyrannical mother figure, the wise king or tyrannical king, how order and chaos both have their wise, benevolent, and tyrannical aspects to them. But then he relates this all through actual stories. So that he loves Dostoevsky. He loves talking about the gulags. He doesn't love the gulags, but he loves talking about the gulags. And then this is the story, myth, narrative, and especially in religious terms. In Exodus series, he's talking about Moses going through the desert and what the Israelites had to go through. So especially these are the first major thrust that everybody's kind of knows about Peterson is that he talks about story, myth, and narrative. The second thrust of his work, psychology and neuropsychology of consciousness and perception. People don't really know Peterson for this, but he's actually a very good as a scientific researcher on phenomenology of consciousness and perception, is that he actually distills this and he connects it to the story, myth, and narrative. So at his famous talk that he gave Logos to the ancient city of Ephesus in the library, the ruins of the library, he talks about how perception is first perception is first a valence of actions of what you can do with objects in your environment. Your environment has objects with valences of what your action can do towards them. A sword is meant for war, a plow is meant for tilling the field. The TV can be turned on, the fridge can be opened, and you can retrieve food from the fridge. These are valences in the objects of the environment around you. And then once you have the valences down pat, you have the ordering of a hierarchy of value to those valences. So you have valences and then a hierarchy of value. So you might have one thing in your mind and you're going to do this one thing for the next 20 minutes or a half hour. And that's an ordering of value. And Peterson likes to connect it all the way up to the pyramid to every microsecond, the attention to every microsecond, the valences of everything around you, the values, and then the highest value, of course, as he says in this talk at Logos Ephesus, is Jesus Christ himself. He's the hero, and the hero is the ultimate, highest value. And in our Western society, Jesus Christ is the ultimate hero. So our attention is, our values are integrated by Jesus Christ. We'll go further into depth into the thrust of Peterson's work in future modules, future courses. And if you're interested in this, I will continue lecturing on this. But just for the purposes of this talk, the two thrusts of Peterson's work are story, myth, and narrative of the religious variety, and two, psychology, neuropsychology of consciousness, perception, ordered in this way that he spoke of valences and hierarchy of value. So those are the two ways that he sees that consciousness and perception are ordered in valence and value. Point 2, descriptively included in Langen's CTMU are these two thrusts of Peterson's work are descriptively included in Langen's CTMU. First, teleology kind of subsumes the idea of teleology and all of its subspecies like telepercursion, telesis, teleology, unbound intellisis. There's other restrictive principles of telesis. Teleology in Langen's CTMU kind of grabs within it story, myth, and narrative, right? Story, myth, and narrative are just more anthropological, human terms that we attach to teleology. They fill out, they color the detail. Peterson colors the detail of what teleology is, but in purposes of making a mathematical metaphysical model as a CTMU is, teleology is the broad stroke of characterizing descriptively in a model what story, myth, and narrative actually are. Do you follow me here? Teleology is part of the model, and it descriptively includes story, myth, and narrative within it. And then 2, the human cognitive perceptual syntax, the HCPS, human cognitive perceptual syntax. We know these as emotive telic syntax. Langen names these as emotive telic syntax, logico-mathematical syntax, and qualio-perceptual syntax, and space-time object syntax. The human cognitive syntax, or human cognitive perceptual syntax, as Langen calls it. This is really a much more deeper and accurate way of describing what consciousness and perception is made of, the component parts of consciousness and perception. So whereas Peterson gives you a psychological breakdown, Langen gives you a strict psychological model name for what it is. It's a human cognitive syntax, and he supersedes Immanuel Kant on this. He supersedes Hegel. He supersedes all the German idealists and all the researchers of linguists and perception in the 20th century. Langen takes all their insights and then includes it in the model as a human cognitive perceptual syntax, which is really much more. It's not only that it includes Peterson's description, it's that it's much more detailed and accurate in this respect. Point 3, Peterson embodies now getting back to Peterson. Peterson embodies the Western spirit in science. Just check my mic's on, yep. Peterson embodies Western spirit in science and religion. So Peterson is still eminently useful and valuable. If you're a CTMUer, I would still recommend that you study Peterson. As I said in my past talks, he's underappreciated as a depth philosopher. His course on personality and his course through the Maps of Meaning lectures that he gave at Harvard, then later Toronto. He's really fleshed these out over 20 to 30 to 35 years. And it's a deep depth metaphysic too, because I included, if psychology and story, myth, and narrative and all these things are included in strong enough language, it then becomes a metaphysic, then becomes a theory on being and nature. We all know this to be true. Peterson embodies the Western spirit in science and religion. I had a dream where I was climbing a mountain with Jordan Peterson, and he couldn't get up. The gradient became too steep, and he was getting old, and he couldn't get up too high. But then he wanted me to go on ahead and get to the top of this mountain. I got to the top of this mountain, and I saw a beast below in the valley below. This was an idiosyncratic dream I had of myself with Jordan Peterson. But basically, Peterson is showing in this dream that I had, showing you up the mountain, right? He's embodying the Western spirit, and it may be that he hands it off to all of us. Why is there such resonance to his speech? It's because he's combining the scientific and the religious worldviews into one narrative. He may not be a spoken Christian and a valid Christian, but he is combining the logic and the truth of Christianity, the Western spirit and science into one powerful narrative, right? I think I'll get into point 4 to get further into this. Point 4, the power of understanding Peterson and locating the significance of his contribution to the CTMU model. So as we get further into following each one of these big four philosophers, as I get further to studying Peterson with you, we will talk about what the power of the significance of locating Peterson in the CTMU model. As Langdon says, language is reality is a language that talks to itself, about itself, a self-configuring, self-processing language. He always describes CTMU as reality is a language that talks to itself, about itself. And the anthropological, the human language that we use to talk about ourselves are contained in the archetypes that Pearson and then following Young created. The archetypes of the hero, the father, the mother nature, father culture, the hero archetype, the prince, the Jesus Christ. These are the anthropological and mythological and archetypal stances that are collective I do believe in the collective unconscious of Carl Jung. And this is the power of understanding Pearson, and we will locate him further into the model of the CTMU as we go along. And 5, we will study maps of meaning as we shall in the future. If you want to know Peterson intimately, you have to read Maps of Meaning. His 12 Rules for Life is nice, but it's more of a pop psychology. Maps of Meaning is his real, true life's work. I think he's following up with a book called We Wrestle with God that later this year in 2024. I don't know how it will hold water compared to Maps of Meaning, considering that Maps of Meaning he wrote Maps of Meaning over the course of 15 years, 3 hours a day, he claims. But Maps Meaning, if you want to understand Peterson, what thrust Peterson to the top of attention, it's not just his pop psychology tips or his tips on your life, how your life should have goals and whatnot, how his popular advice for young men. It's actually on the basis of this study of Jung and Campbell and collective unconscious and archetypes and story, myth, and narrative. And then he couples this with perception and consciousness. So we will study Maps Meaning further. I hope this was good for you to give you an appreciation for Jordan Peterson, because he is undervalued as a depth philosopher. And with this, we'll go further into future modules, future courses, future seasons into Jordan Peterson, as I think he's a good person to study. Even though he's popular, his popularity, he's still smart, right? He's a depth philosopher, a depth metaphysician of the 21st century. So I hope that's good for you. It's good for me. Until next time, take care. God bless. Amen. Bye-bye.